Ayawaso East. We've been joined on the line by the Minister for Government Communications. In fact, if you look on the front page of the Ghanaian Times, government upholds dismissal of 541 employees. Mr. Felix Kwakye Ofosu joins us on the line. Good morning.
Oh, good morning.
I hope you're well.
Oh, I'm good. Are you?
I am also doing well. People keep saying you fired thousands of people when you took over. You're talking about 541 employees. Are those the total number of people whose recruitment was revoked when you came in?
Well, I need to put it in context so that listeners will have a much deeper appreciation of the issues. So what had happened was that at the first meeting of the transition team, the incoming government side, for whom I was the spokesperson, raised concern about reports that we had received about last-minute hurried recruitments into the public service. Now, it was not so much about how hurriedly the thing was being done, as it was about the irregularity that was being reported as attending the whole recruitment. So we requested that such recruitments, in view of the fact that it will have implications for the public wage, and being the government that is coming in, we will be the ones saddled with the duty of finding the money to pay. It was only prudent that we were allowed to be part of the processes that was taking place so that we could review it and be certain about exactly what was happening. We had also heard about some major payments to creditors, contractors, and other suppliers in the dying members of the Akufo-Addo administration. So we had requested that we be allowed to be part of the process so that we have a full understanding of what was happening. Now, this was turned down, even though on 17 December, when we met again, we were given an impression that our concerns had been noted and are going forward consulted on such decisions. Well, a few hours after that, it became clear that the government was not willing to budge. So if you recall, I put out a statement on the same day expressing our intent to carry out a review of these processes to ensure that it met the requirements of due process and that people who did not qualify had not been railroaded into the public service. So when we took over power on 10 February, the chief staff issued a directive to all agencies in the public service to revoke the appointments of anybody appointed after 7th December. Now, this was carried out, but we began to receive reports that people whose appointments preceded 7th December or who had started the process way before 7th December but could not complete it before the elections had also been affected. Now, we thought this would be unfair and that it would unduly punish persons who had committed no wrong. So the Chief of Staff, I beg your pardon, set up a committee to look into these matters. And it is the outcome of the committee's report that I put out yesterday. Essentially, about 45 government institutions were involved in these recruitments of a total of about 2,080 people. Out of this number, 1,201 were deemed to have met all requirements. You see, so the requirements were clearly outlined in my statement yesterday. There should have been a declaration of a vacancy. An advert should have been rolled out. The persons who wish to be recruited should have applied. Technical clearance should have been sought. Financial clearance should have been sought. An interview or check-in process should have taken place. The results of same published. And then an appointment letter issued to successful applicants. Now, if anybody met 80% of these requirements, they were deemed to have qualified to be employed. So 1,201 people met these requirements, and therefore their appointments, recruitments, or promotions were upheld. That means that if they've been asked to go home, they can be reinstated. Then a total of 879 applicants were deemed not to have met the requirements. But it was found that out of this lot, about 338 of them were persons who you could describe as belonging to vulnerable groups. Either they were living with persons living with disability or some other vulnerability. Now, on purely humanitarian grounds, it was thought that they should be reinstated so that they don't suffer unduly because of their peculiar circumstances. So this was not done with any political motive or any intent to discriminate against any citizen of Ghana. It was to ensure that due process is carried out. In Ghana, all Ghanaians must have equal opportunity to be employed into the public service to the extent that they meet the requirements. So when on the advent or after the loss of an election, a government hurriedly recruits people and bypasses laid down processes, then it is problematic. It is not fair, it is not just, and the right thing must be done. That is why this action was carried out.
So it is not as much about the timing for you as it about following procedure.
Well, the timing was worrying because it had implications for the budget, the implications for the wage bill. And it was also disrespectful to the incoming administration. What should be done is that as part of the handing over notes, all of these should be declared. That we started the process. This is where we got to. So if you have any input or any indications, let us know. Nothing of the sort was done. But that was even less of a problem compared to the fact that these people were being recruited when due process had not been followed. That really was a worry. That is how come you find that there are people who met the requirements and therefore have been reinstated.
So for you, all those would have been avoided if there was a conversation then and some clarity on what was happening, and then maybe you had made your inputs. It wouldn't have come
Of
here.
course. Of course. All that would have happened was that, like I said, they put it in a handing over notes. So, okay, so my sector, Ministry of Information, we began a process to recruit people. So far, we have shortlisted about 30 people, and they are due for interview on this date. This is the panel. This is what will happen. That's all. Then we would be obliged to continue. Of course, as an incoming government, we would carry out a review of the process to see whether it was. That is what every government would do. So there's nothing wrong with it. But surely they should respect the people of Ghana who have given a mandate to a party to assume office. It is true that the mandate of the government does not end immediately after elections. It is when they hand over formally that the mandate ends. But practically, once a transition process begins, the incoming government must be made aware of everything that has happened in the country so that it aids effective continuation of governance and administration. That is what ought to have happened.
Do you know whether these people are still at posts or they've all been sent home?
No, they were revoked. It means that they were sent home. So those whose appointments have been upheld will be reinstated.
What will follow next? To get, what do you do? Would you communicate to the institutions?
They
Have
will
you
be
already
communicated,
done
yes.
that?
The institutions will be communicated. In fact, the institutions have been in the know. Many of them appeared before the committee. So they are fully aware of the processes that have gone into this decision. So they will be written to formally. And the people who are deemed to have met the requirements will be duly notified.
And to this 541 employees, their appointment has been completely revoked.
Exactly. They simply did not meet the requirement. In other words, it is as if they were never employed.
I see. Well, before I let you go, there's one thing that I realized. The Ghanaian Times also reporting brace up for economic shocks, Middle East crisis, President Mahama. Is that to suggest that you in government are worried about what is happening?
But of course, first of all, nobody wants war. And then second, we all know that because of the way that crude oil production and transportation functions, a conflict in that part of the world has implications for crude oil prices. So definitely there is some cause for concern. But even as those concerns are expressed, the government also is working to mitigate whatever impacts may arise. The MPA chief executive has indicated that we have several weeks stock of fuel. So the price of fuel is unlikely to be affected immediately, despite what happens on the world market. Then, yesterday, the Minister for Energy and Green Transition also convened a meeting with stakeholders in the sector to assess the situation and take steps to protect the again from any shocks. Then thirdly, and most importantly, the economic fundamentals we have now are much, 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 much better than it was under the NPP. And therefore, we believe that there are sustainable buffers that have been built that will lessen any potential impact that arises out of the current conflict. But that a conflict can have ripple effects in other places is well known. It is just that under the NPP, when COVID struck and the Russia-Ukraine conflict struck, the economy was in disarray already. It was on very weak foundations. So that load simply crumbled the economy. That is what it's about. If the fundamentals are strong and the economy is resting on strong pillars, we'll be able to absorb that shock. In other words, Ghanaians are significantly protected from the effects. So this is the difference that must be struck between the two scenarios.
You're saying the assessment is still ongoing?
Oh, of course. We continue to watch the situation closely and take steps to ensure that Ghanaians do not suffer.
Is there clarity on how badly exposed we will be to this if it continues?
Essentially, crude oil prices tend to rise because of these things. And you all know that there are factors that contribute to fuel pricing in Ghana. There are three. The price of the commodity on the world market, which nobody can do anything about. Then there's the exchange rate at which the commodity is bought. And then there are taxes that are imposed. Now, if you take the first one, which is the price of crude oil on the world market, that one, let's say I'm done about it. We don't determine it. However, we have control over the exchange rate. Indeed, only yesterday, I made a point in Parliament that Ghana's currency has recorded its steepest climb against the dollar in living memory of 40.7%. Today, at interbank rate, it is 10.6 Ghana cedis. So that is better than the situation where it was 17 cedis. So that, for instance, if the world market price of crude oil were to go to $100 a barrel, if the cedi are 17 cedis, that would be 1,700 Ghana cedis. I beg your pardon, 11,700 Ghana cedis. No, it's 1,700 Ghana cedis. I beg your pardon. However, if the cedi is at 10.6 and the world market price of crude oil is $100, that is 1,000 cedis or 1,000 cedis 60 pesos. You understand me? A reduction of 700 cedis. So if you go and buy an item at 1,700 cedis, you will price it at a certain level. If you bought the same item at 1,000 cedis, you certainly are going to sell it lower than you would do when you bought it at 1,700. So that is the impact of the exchange rates on fuel. And then there are taxes, but those are negligible because since we came in, it's only the D levy that has been imposed. But even that has had very little effect on the price. The price has remained very, very low for a better part of 2024 and since the start of this year.
I see. And then also, last year we realized that you insisted on an austere celebration of the Independence Day. Would you be saying same this year?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As I speak to you, final preparations are being made for the ceremony on Friday. And it is still going to be held at the forecourt of the presidency, unlike in the past when it has been held at the Independence Square. Now, last year we did same, and by holding it at the forecourt of the presidency, it necessarily led to a cut in the numbers of officials involved in the celebration. So in the past, we roughly had about 3,600 men and women from the various security agencies and some school children. This time round, it has been cut to just about 300 or so. That also has led to a 95% cut in the budget from almost 220 million Ghana cedis to just under 1.5 million Ghana cedis. That is a significant cut that must be acknowledged. Indeed, the last celebration under the MPP, which was held in Ho, I believe, cost 15 million Ghana cedis. So by bringing it to the presidency, we have ensured that at least compared to the last celebration under the MPP, we have cut it by over 80 or 90%. If we do it at Independence Square, it's more costly because it's a bigger place and the logistics required are more than when you do it as a regional capital. And that would have cost about 20 million. Today, it will cost just under 1.5 million. So that is a significant saving that cannot be overlooked.
I see. Would this become the norm? Or would this be
Of
the
course, President
norm
Mahama
under
has
President Mahama?
indicated that he will do everything necessary to cut the cost of running government. So you see it reflected in the cuts in the number of ministers, cuts in the number of employees at the presidency, political appointees at the presidency, and cuts in various agencies of government, curbs on the amount of travel that public officials can undertake and the mode of such travel, cuts in perks to public officials. So, for instance, I was receiving fuel allowance. No, not fuel allowance. I was getting an allocation of fuel every week when I initially assumed duty. But that was cut by President Mahama. So now I buy my own fuel. And it is the same for all those who work at the presidency and some public agencies. All of these things add some savings. We used to have DSTV at the presidency. It is no more. When you come to your presidency, anytime you come to my office, you are not going to get DSTV to watch. All of that adds to the savings that government makes. So it is part of a broader effort to lessen the cost of running government so that resources can be plowed back into meeting the critical needs of the people of Ghana.
Well, you're an MP yourself. These things tend to stimulate some economic activities, empower some small businesses who get the small contracts at the local level and everything. Was that also considered, how it will impact small businesses at the local level?
Oh, there will be celebrations at the local level. All the streets will celebrate it.
Western all they said 20,000. You can't spend more than 20,000.
Oh, yes, but even that money will go into the local economy as well. But we have to weigh that against the overall cost of government having more money to address the needs of the people of Ghana. So it's a cost-benefit analysis. Yes, there's some boost to the local economy, but that is minimal compared to the cost that is saved. The money that is saved is then plowed back into running the country and ensuring that the needs of the people are met. So let me give you an example. I'm sure you followed my visit to the constituency this weekend. Since we've been in power, in the last year alone, we've completed about 8 projects. I commissioned about 5 of them over the weekend. Compared to the year before we took over, you see a vast improvement in government's ability to provide social services to the people. Why is that? Because government has been able to save enough resources to make these disbursements. In the past, that was not the case. People were suffering. They didn't have basic amenities because government did not have the money to send to them, because government was spending money on non-essential things that did not have any tangible benefits for the people. So that is the gain you make when you cut expenditure on running government itself and remove unnecessary expenditure into non-essential areas and apply it back into essential areas like education, like health, and other forms of social spending.
Meanwhile, there are cases heading your way from Abrim in the eastern region. In fact, Abrim. In fact, some farmers with a minority mate said they will curse your boss. I'm sure it will touch you, to touch all the other appointees, because you've touched the cocoa prices. Would you consider, because you are my good friend and I don't want to lose you to a case, would you consider actually...
Well, it's important to distinguish between genuine sentiments raised by farmers who are concerned about the sector, and then politically staged drama by the New Patriotic Party. So if you look at it that way, you will not make much of these claims.
You think there's a politically staged drama?
That when the minority wears Wellington boots and go to farms to go and gather MPP functionaries, MPP supporters, even if they are farmers, and get them to say things in order to boost their own political ego, I don't think that you can make much of it. There are genuine farmers who have expressed concern. We, on the other hand, as a government, have explained the necessity of the action that has been taken. It is to preserve the cocoa sector. What has happened was that at some point, cocoa was stuck in warehouses of LBCs and the farms because the price that we were given was deemed uncompetitive compared to prices elsewhere. Prices had tanked on the world market price. Yes, we had maintained the price that we had fixed based on the previous world market price that had fallen. Therefore, it was necessary to act in order that we are able to evacuate that cocoa and inject substantial liquidity into the system to be able to pay farmers. And since that happened, close to 3.6 billion Ghana cedis has flowed to the cocoa farmer in the last few weeks alone since the new producer price was announced. We also know about efforts in Cote d'Ivoire, our neighbor, and the world's largest cocoa producer, to also slash their farm gate price because the beans are stuck in warehouses, their prices are not deemed to be competitive, and nobody wants to touch it. So it vindicates the position we took. That in order to get this sector moving and remove the bottleneck that had arisen, there was a need to tweak the price a bit, which is 90% of the current world market price. That means that we have kept faith with the Ghanaian farmer, who we promised to give 70% of the world market price to.
I see. Let me then conclude by reading a question from Kobna Sminters, who says, Sena, any punishment for state actors who supervise the wrongful employment?
Oh, well, of course, it will be looked into. If anybody violated Ghanaian law, there will be dealt with. That one goes without saying.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking to us.
The pleasure is mine.
Felix Kwakye Ofosu is Member of Parliament for Abra Asebu Kwamankesi and also Minister for Government Communications, Presidential Spokesperson, joining us on the line this morning. I took the opportunity to ask him some other questions, including the matter of the cases that are headed their way. The people say the way they will curse them. Anyway, very interesting. So this is the squad that went to the cocoa farm.